I'm joined today by Toby Meakins and Simon Allen, writer, co-creator, and director, respectively, co-creators of Choose or Die. How did you come to get involved with the project?
Who wants to go? Toby, you go.
Yeah, no, you take it. You take it away.
Well, it had quite as these things often do, quite a torturous journey. We made a very well acclaimed short film called Floor 9.5 for Fox, which went out on Fox on various television channels in 2017 and caused an uproar. It was a bit of a viral sensation. And there was a lot of interest in sort of more horror from us because we made a couple of other horror shorts together before that. So we came up with this idea, Cursor, right, which was just a sort of play on words, a game containing a curse, 8-bit and all of that. And it was Toby that kind of said, oh, we should have, if you're going to have this kind of archaic artifact from the 1980s, you should have someone contemporary being menaced by it. And those two things together created this sort of idea of, you know, a contemporary character who has a problematic relationship with the kind of pop culture iconography and artifacts of the 80s, and playing that as a sort of the same way someone like M.R. James plays with kind of medieval artifacts and so on, and trying to recalibrate our kind of relationship with that decade, because so much stuff is full of veneration and you know, respect, and it's kind of deified almost. And we got a lot of interest in it. And at one point, Ridley Scott was attached to it as an exec producer, and it was going to be a Quibi project, and Jeffrey Katzenberg loved it, and it was going to be one of their big shows. And then we all know what happened with Quibi. And it was Toby who reconceived it and said, look, I think we could do this as a low budget horror film, very much with that kind of indie vibe. And quite by surprise, Netflix saw it, loved it, and wanted to roll with it. And they took this punky, raspy little indie horror film from Britain and put it on the biggest platform in the world, and it's been extraordinary.
Other reviewers who've watched the film have made comparisons to the Saw franchise, but for you guys personally, what films influenced
well, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting comparison actually, because it never really came into our to our heads that we were kind of trying to make something that was kind of Saw like. It was what did we watch? So it's always been M.R. James for the purpose, you know, the M.R. James, it was the 60s and the early 70s, wasn't it, like the BBC, I mean, they were all watched before we went into production with this, because that's exactly what we were trying to do. Pulse was a big influence on this. Just everything that we love, really, everything from The Others to Pulse to like Candyman was an influence on this. Do you know the original Candyman? Nightmare on Elm Street was an influence on this.
I was going to say, with regards to obviously the iconography, it would be remiss of me not to mention Robert Englund, because he comes with a lot of legacy. He comes with a lot of, you know, connection to that particular era. How easy was it to get him on board with this?
So that was really cool. So there, I mean, there's a massive upside for Robert Englund, right? Because like it's horror royalty. So we wrote, you know, we had this kind of like, when we were designing the structure of the game and how the game in the film would be sold, how it would have been marketed to get these kids in to play it as beta testers, and you know, the idea that Beck's rolling out this game, it's like, well, who would they get? They would get like the biggest horror star they could of the day. And so it's like, well, they can only be Robert Englund. We can only be Robert Englund. And it's like, okay, let's you know, got a great American producer. It's like, let's try it. Let's take a punt. Do you know what I mean? So we sent the script to Robert, and he came back and said yes. And he says yes to hardly anything, you know. And we did a really great voice record session with him. He told us how to use his voice, how his voice sounds best now. But like, it was really, really giving, really cool, really free, really gave me some kind of great advice as a first-time filmmaker as well. So, and it was great, and it really added to it. Yeah, the marketing obviously always sells it as Robert Englund is in your movie, and it's like, no, but it's a cameo. And so it's almost like there's a double-edged sword there, because people are going, well, they didn't have Robert Englund in their film, they're lying to us. It's like, you know, that was never the intention.
It's worth pointing out that it was shot, you know, when we were still in lockdown, so we couldn't get people over from America anyway. And I think Robert really did love it and was really engaged with it and supported it on Twitter and everything, which is fantastic. But it just wasn't possible to bring anyone over from the States to be in the movie. It wasn't considered safe at that point. But it was one of those things that we just knew we inflected the story with as many references as we could possibly do. You see the Nightmare on Elm Street poster. There's obviously a lot of stuff on the soundtrack. And that was just an incredible bonus when he responded so well. And he really responded to Toby, to be honest with you. I mean, it was Toby that communicated with him and ran the voice sessions, and it sounded like an absolute riot. We kept getting like footage and sent clips like, oh my God, you know, and it was fantastic. It really was.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Asa Butterfield he's quite it's quite an interesting choice to play Isaac. The fact that he was connected to Sex Education, obviously quite a high profile Netflix title, was that purely coincidence, or was that how did that casting process come about?
So I mean,
well, it was pretty brutal. I mean, you know, as I say, this was an indie film. And
okay, all right, we're telling the
yeah, we'll tell it.
Okay, so basically, when you're making an indie film and you want to get it made, and you want to get it greenlit, you have to have a level of actor that's going to get the film greenlit for you.
Yeah, sure.
And Ace is, you know, technically he's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. He's been doing it since he's a kid. I mean, it's extraordinary, actually. Ace Butterfield as an actor, like, honestly. But it was you need named actors, and then we'll finance this film, and that's the process.
So we had to do this call with him, the Zoom call. And we were literally told if it goes well, you'll be greenlit afterwards. And so I was really primed and pumped and like, okay, we've got to pitch Asa, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. I was all ready for it. Toby's much cooler than I am, so he was much more relaxed. And Asa fired up at like 10 o'clock at night. I think he was still shooting Sex Education or something. And he got all this kind of gaming paraphernalia in the background and everything, and was really like enthusiastic about the script and the films and the 8-bit stuff, and as I think he'd even made his own 8-bit game, and I just
him and his mate made their own 8-bit game. He's a massive gaming fan, and he really loved the project. Robert was like really clear, like one of the pieces of advice that he gave us was, you know, which kind of tracks into the way that Simon and I work, was make sure that the film has levity, make sure that it's just not like an endless kind of like bleak,
like a bombardment of you
know. And Asa really, you know, did a fantastic job of bringing that to this film. I think, you know, that's kind of like a big part of what he was doing for us here. Do you know what I mean? It was like not the comic relief, but the lightness in the story. Do you know what I mean? To show that this kid, there was kind of hope for Kayla. Between
you two, creatively, obviously, Simon's the writer, you're the director, but you're co-creators of the piece. How does that collaboration work between you outside of the movie stars and the actual process?
He's an absolute head.
Oh,
no, I'm sorry.
To be honest, I mean, it's worth watching if you haven't, Martin, and I'll send you the links, because, you know, to the short films we made, because it was just a bigger version of that. You know, one of us has an idea, the other one augments it, we roll with it, we push back and forth. And I think it's really important to stress. I've noticed that, you know, a lot of people probably think this is like a Netflix thing, you know, and it is a Netflix thing, and we're so proud that we're particularly proud that they took something that's sort of transgressing and punching at a lot of their kind of holy grails, you know, the pop culture, the 80s, the nostalgia and all of that, and they've taken something this sort of transgressive and subversive, but it's an indie film that's gone out, and over the weekend it was the #1 film I think on any SVOD anywhere in the world, we were told last night, you know. And it was really weird being sent a chart, you know, with like Turning Red at #2 and Adam Project at #3 and us at #1, and that has never happened to us before. You know, our short films have always been well regarded and always done well, but they've never had that kind of impact, and we've been a bit kind of taken aback by that. But I think it's been lovely that this thing that's always been such a small thing between us, you know, it's always been quite an intimate thing between me and Toby, that we trust each other, we're old friends, we've worked together for so long, and Toby, for me, has always been where I've been at my most creative, when I've been able to do the things that I really am interested in, that usually no one will pay me for, right? Or nobody will commission. And we really did approach this with the same mentality that we have with our short films. And so for it to go this big so quickly, it's completely overwhelming and amazing.
Going back to the short films as well, when we made I think it's this thing, isn't it? It's about finding an audience, right? So when we made Floor 9.5 for Fox, they basically approached 12 filmmakers, and they said, they approached 100 filmmakers and said, will you pitch to us? And they're all kind of rep filmmakers. And then they picked 12, and then they gave 12 filmmakers a bunch of money to make a short film that was 2 minutes long. and then they were taking, and they told all of those filmmakers that they were taking those films to broadcast. In fact, they're only taking 4. The 4 that they were taking to broadcast was that essentially it was tied into Skittles and Mars. It was,
we made a Skittles act, basically.
Basically, it was like because Halloween is so big in the States. Basically, what they did is they bought 2-minute advertising slots in primetime TV, and picked the 4 films that they thought would work the best as in primetime TV. Ours was like Skittles Presents bite-sized horror at the top of it, and then showed our 2-minute like horror film, like Kafkaesque horror film, actually.
Yeah.
In the ad break of the playoffs of the American baseball. Do you know what I mean? It was insane.
Well, I guess my 2 cents of it is I saw the film yesterday, and then I watched it again about, I don't know, probably about 11:30 last night, just to see if it would have the same impact second time round. And actually, I think the fact that it is an indie film, but it is on a mainstream platform, it's surrounded by lots of shiny whistles and bells from other projects. Actually, it plays to its advantage, because it strips away all of the artifice and all the visual effects, and all the money, which sort of maybe like robs the story and sort of distracts. So I think it actually works really, really well. Guys, I've got 2 more questions. One is about Mr. Liam Howlett. Obviously, the soundtrack plays such an important part in the film, and I can never pronounce this, so I'm going to try and pronounce this. Obviously, he was in The Prodigy. I can never say it right. And see, I told you I get it wrong. And my missus is like, no, you don't say it like that. Anyway, can you tell me how he got involved?
So we were like, okay, we want a different score. Again, we were going down the route, like, we don't want a classic horror score. We want to try and do something different. Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff getting made now, and for you to get your work seen, you need to change it up. And so we were looking for bands. Actually, we thought, okay, it'd be great to have a band come and do the score. What can we do? And we started looking at some indie bands and stuff, like some really cool people I'm not going to mention because it's and the music supervisor came to us and said, look, Liam Howlett's never done I know his manager, and he's never done a score before, and and he's quite interested. And we were like, oh, he'll never do it. And we had a meeting. And he saw the deck. Like, a big part of getting this put together was like the deck that we put together. We saw the deck, and the shortson was like, yeah, let me send you some stuff. This was before Christmas, before the Christmas that we shot it, before we even greenlit it. And I was like, we ended, and the producer was like the producer's a massive Prodigy fan, like super fan. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like a religion. It's like brilliant. And he was like, oh, it was worth it. It was worth it just to have like one call with Liam. And we thought that was it. We thought, Liam really thought, oh, that'd be it. We won't hear anything again. And like 6 weeks later, some kind of tracks turned up in my box. like this kind of like this really cool dark soundscape stuff, and I was absolutely petrified to open it, because I'm like, if I open this and I hate it, like, what am I going to do?
What are you going to say?
That's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean? The guy's a genius, and the stuff he sent was just we used it on set. So basically, even before we started shooting, the DNA of Liam's music, which was just like soundscapes, really. We were playing them on set and we were using them, and it's the way that we were thinking about the film. And Liam was just brilliant after that. When we started the cut, instead of waiting to the end of the film and the score going on, because we knew it would be different, and because the score was going to be different, he like, sonically, he's pretty much just saying that he did the score is probably like, it is really underdoing it, because like the whole sonic soundscape of the film is pretty much him. The only sounds that didn't come from him really are the game, like, and the Foley. Like, pretty much everything else in there is him. And he would send us stuff at the beginning of the process. He would send us stuff, and it's like, oh, what do you think about that bit for this bit? And we'd go, oh no, but we like it here, but we want to use that bit there, and can you break that bit down into stems for us so we can use it here and stuff? And that's how it comes. So it's very kind of organic how it worked at the beginning, and then obviously as you go on on into the film, the cut becomes refined. What you're asking the composer to becomes more refined as well, and it just kind of, but because we created like a language, you know, an understanding, we were communicating really well. It kind of worked really well all the way through. Wow.
I'll tell you what, it occurs to me, literally occurred to me a second ago. The opening credits of Shallow Grave, which is a left field track over the top of it, are quite similar sonically, quite sort of like propulsive and sort of like really sort of like synth driven.
Yeah,
just a thought.
Yeah, it's that thing, isn't it? You've got to lean in. Like it was, you know, you bring somebody like Liam on, and you lean into what he's great at. You don't go in and go, let's completely change what you do. You go, this is what you're great at. You want to explore this. Let's do it that way. So it was kind of, you know, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that his involvement didn't change the way I thought about film. Do you know what I mean? He became like a creative partner in that respect, rather than going, oh, you know, I need this, and this. It was like, you know, what do you think about this? But then when you go to Liam and you go, okay, can you give us like a cool Twilight Zone sound theme? Can you give us some emotional stuff? It's like, yeah, I can do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like brilliant.
Creatively, if you had to choose between all the time in the world and no money, or all the money in the world and no time, which one would you choose and why?
I suppose in terms of the films, I think that they're, you know, it is an indie, Choose or Die is an indie film, and it did have a constrained budget, and that was baked into the way it was executed and into the script. And we had to, as we always have with the short films, it's always had to be what we know we can execute, what we know can achieve. And the great thing about our relationship is that we can have these very, very complex visual ideas, and Toby always figures out a way of achieving them with very minimal resources. And I thrive on that. I find that amazing. You know, I've worked on shows and things with huge budgets, and it doesn't necessarily make you more creative. I think that sometimes restriction does produce more creativity because you solve things practically and tangibly. And again, you know, I love that kind of handmade quality where you can see the fingerprints of the creativity in the film. And I think you can see that with Choose or Die. So look, I mean, I would love all the time in the world and all the money in the world, but I think that there is something really true and honest and something really exciting that happens when you're up against it. And I think almost anyone who works in film and TV, if they're being honest, would say that, you know, it's the solving of problems that's the most exciting thing about this job and this industry. And you very quickly, as you progress in the industry and you work with more and more people, you learn that the people that really endure are the ones that are good at doing that. They're not the ones that sit back and make assumptions about how easy it is to do these things. They're the ones that understand what it's like at the coalface. So I like the creativity of problem solving and you know, not having huge resources and all of that. I think it's great, and I think you can see that in this movie.
And one of like the visual effects guys, I mean, we mixed visual effects and like SFX as much as we could in this, because that's the way that I like to work. But they were like, you know, they were very much that. If we had more money, we could throw people at it and we could get it to exactly where you wanted it in the time scale that we need you to get it into. Do you know what I mean? Because this is the other thing. Often the time money thing argument becomes irrelevant because the people want to sell it or get it into, or it's got to be shown at a certain point anyway. Do you know, you're already working to like a restricted kind of deadline. And if that was the case, give me the money every day of the week. Do you know what I mean? If they're like,
yeah,
what would
exactly.
you do, Martin? What would your answer be?
It's the best question.
How dare you? How dare you? How dare you turn the tables on me, Simon? What would I do? Well, I write, so time. I'm a terrible procrastinator. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure, Simon. I knew that we'd get on. Toby, it's been a pleasure. Really, it's been a dream. Thank you so much. Good luck with the film. Not that I think you're going to need it, but yeah, take care.